Yeah.
Scott. If you could, just a little
I think
humming.
Will probably has the voice of an angel. I bet Will can sing.
Yeah, Will,
Oh,
could
I
you
pick this
just
microphone up and
right
talk
now?
real nice to these people.
Yeah, Will, put us to sleep right now. That would be wonderful.
Are we live,
We're
aren't
just
we?
we're almost live, and we sometimes it takes me a second to know if we're actually live.
Yeah.
So I'm always here doing the song and
And then
dance.
you go back and watch it, you see like he put us
In
live
the
like 5 minutes
first
before he
10
said he
seconds,
did.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Why is this
Singing into the
happening?
microphone live. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is good. This is our song and dance, and Will is doing our information. And we are officially live. So thank you for listening to the song and dance. Next time, Will is actually going to sing to you all and get the together. So thank you all for being here. Tech Talk Tuesday, August 5th. And FRI is a week away for anyone that's attending. Excited to see you all there. But today, really excited to have both Mike Cox and Phil Ambrose, who are going to talk about a lot of things about technology adoption and change management and technology trends in the fire service. And I'll be here as sort of the Susu moderator, to pass over to Scott and Will. And grateful. And please, if you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, fire up questions, fire up anything in the chat, and we will answer it real time. This is an event for you to be selfish and ask questions, and we will get you the answers. So, Scott and Will, over to you.
Well, welcome back to Tech Talk Tuesday. This is the first Tuesday of the month. Scott Roseberry coming to you from Dallas, Texas, Battalion Chief in Garland Fire Department, Chair of the IFC Technology Council. Like Kevin said, today we got Mike Cox on from Esri and Phil Ambrose from HazSim, but he's also a Battalion Chief in LA County. Is that right, Phil?
City of Glendale.
City of Glendale, so out in California. But we also have Will on. Will is celebrating something exciting that he just accomplished.
National Registry, EMT. I took the class 20 years ago, but had to do it again with the new department. And so I took the test yesterday. I thought it was really easy, so I was nervous, but I got it. First chance out the gate. Apparently giving everyone oxygen was the right answer because that's all I did. I clicked oxygen. Everybody got oxygen. You broke your arm, oxygen. So
you can officially put a non-rebreather on and a Band-Aid on somebody.
that's literally what I did. That was all my answers. Like you guys are laughing, but that's what I did. Every answer I gave them oxygen. Splinter arm, oxygen. So any of you young EMTs out there, there you go. That's the answer.
Sure, that wasn't the trainer. Is that what you're doing? You're now an instructor? No, I'm just kidding.
No, let's not go too far. Chief already asked when am I going to paramedic school. I was like, easy, buddy, easy. Slow that down.
Yeah.
So I don't need to introduce myself, right, Sky? Everybody knows who I am. Newly formed EMT, Charlottesville Fire Department. I'm already told I made an announcement over to Station PA yesterday. New sheriff in town when it comes to medical stuff. So I need to schedule an appointment with the medical director. We got some changes that need to be made.
Oh man, another 2020. Been there 20 minutes. Act like you've been there 20 years.
I mean, that's the way of the fire service, right? Been on the ambulance twice here, buddy. I'm an expert. No,
You know,
but
how every SOG and policy has a name on it. I see a lot coming to Charlotte's.
Just have a picture, Mike. Just my picture, just my ugly mug right there. But welcome back, everybody. Tech Talk Tuesday. Got some special guests. Got some great topics today. So who wants to lead it off? Phil, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Phil Ambrose. I work in Southern California. The year-round fire season, which is now upon us as it is. I go back to work tomorrow, and we've got a heat wave, and we've got a little bit of weather coming in. But yeah, I've been in the fire service 25 plus years. Happy to be here. I'm also chair of the FireScope Emerging Information Technologies Work Group, which, as I like to say, I bring down the average IQ in any room I walk into. And with the EIT group, we've got some spectacular individuals who speak at a lot of these conferences. In fact, I'm sitting here in place of Kevin Fetterman from Orange County, who's also with our EIT group. So happy to be here and kind of talk tech and the reality of tech and tech adoption.
Perfect. Mike?
Hey, Mike Cox, Director of Fire and EMS for Esri, GIS and geospatial software provider, but retired from Henrico County, Virginia, about 30 years in the fire service, 27 of which was with Henrico County, which is Richmond, Virginia, central part of the state. Retired there as the Deputy Chief of Community Risk Reduction, which included our IT section, fire marshal, a bunch of other stuff. But I think I took a pretty familiar route for a lot of firefighters where you start out as operational And then suddenly you're put into a position where you're faced with procurement and identifying technologies and things you really didn't sign up for when you took the job as firefighter. So it can be, somewhat of a difficult process, particularly specific to the fire departments and fire and EMS agencies, because our application of technologies are somewhat different than in normal industry, right? And we often find ourselves trying to adopt our organizations to be able to use certain technologies when it should not be that way. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But my experience as a local chief officer really impacted me around, identifying and deploying technology appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great point. It kind of goes into what we were talking about before we hit the button, right, Scott? That making sure that technology matches your department. Different technology works for different places. So, for example, for the listeners and viewers, they brought a Rosenbauer. We very grateful to them this morning. If they ever want to sponsor, we also accept swag. Since Coke hasn't yet, Rosenbauer, we're here for you. But Fesco brought over a electric fire truck, or hybrid, I suppose, the RTX, and we drove it around the city. They were brave enough to let our city manager actually drive it on a real road. Multiple members drove it. We got to see its functionality, so it could work for us. But would it work everywhere? I don't know. I'm not gonna speak for other departments, but same with all technology, right, Mike? What works in Charlottesville may not work in Henrico. So what was some of the technology that you employed in Henrico that just worked for you guys? Henrico's a large area, complex, I'm sure, lots of government things to work through. You're talking about procurement. What was one thing that you were proud of while you were there that just worked?
Well, I think it was the way we approached our technology adoption overall, really, in probably the last 10 or 15 years, was we incorporated any technologies it was initially a technology strategic plan, and then it just became a part of our overall strategic plan, which was important because when you buy technology, you can't buy it in the silo. It has to be able to talk to, connect with, and share data with other technologies you already own. So we have to make sure that works, right? But it also ties it to one of the strategies or objectives of your department. So it's easier, I say easier, it's a method to justify those technology adoption or technology procurement in the budgetary processes and all that. But the point is, have a plan. Don't just go out and buy the next shiny thing. And I think we were very proud of the fact that we had a well-documented technology plan. Like I said, initially it was a standalone plan, but then we just put it in our overall strategic plan, which was, blessed by the county manager and board of supervisors and things like that. So they knew what was coming before it got there. We knew how to approach it, and we knew how it was going to impact the whole system, not just a siloed area of technology use.
Yeah,
Well, I like how we were talking about like every city's a little different. We were actually talking about this at work yesterday because we were comparing our city to Plano, which is a neighboring city, and I was like, hey guys, we really can't compare city to city. Now I understand when you're looking at salaries and kind of looking at the greater economics, you're looking for parity for among your sister cities when you're looking at that. But you're really comparing apples to oranges when you're comparing one city to the next. Because every city, for one, has a different history on how it came into existence. And then, like we're a really old city. We came built our infrastructure years before everybody else did. We filled out years before everybody else around us. So we have different revenue sources and different tax sources. So comparing us to a neighboring city that's growing like Frisco's growing like crazy, they have all kinds of revenue coming in. They have money. I think they're burning money up there. They have so much they don't know what to do with it. We're in really hard financial times right now in our city. So, when you start doing that comparison from city to city, every city is different, which means their needs are different. So that's why, one technology doesn't fit every city. Everybody has got a little bit different needs on the services they're offering too.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, a lot of that, what that locality profile looks like. Well, we had a large special event venue, which I know many of the fire agencies online probably do as well. We had a NASCAR facility, and I'll go back to what we were proud of. I was pretty proud of the way we adopted technology to manage that special event. And back 2014, 2015, we're tracking firefighters in the field and J-Hat and EMS carts and walking teams where that just wasn't done. I mean, we were literally running that special event off of a handheld radio and a yellow pad of paper before we started engaging in the appropriate technology. So a specific, I guess, deployment that probably be near the top of my list is the way we manage special events.
Nice. We were looking at that fire truck this morning. Phil, maybe you can touch on some of this of what you've seen technology, how it's grown over the years, right? So we were sitting out there, we're looking at this hybrid / electric fire trucks, EV, and for some reason I always go back to this image in my mind that 100 maybe a little bit more years ago, that there was the same group of firefighters standing around looking at this motorized fire apparatus in there and talking about the same stuff, right? How are we going to get fuel for it? It's going to catch fire. It's dangerous. And then the horses are in the bay, and hey, look, there's grass everywhere. Food's abundant. They're easy to maintain. And we're having the same discussion about technology changing again. Have you
You
seen?
asking Phil like he was there when it
Oh no, bro! Oh man!
I was
Oh
previously
man!
discovered.
Oh.
Phil, what was it like with
That's
horses?
what
No,
it
I
was
don't want to do that. I'm talking about the change of technology. What's some technology you've seen over the change of your career where it's almost like a circle, right? We start here and then you go around a loop.
Well, and what to Chief Cox's statement on having a plan, I think that's that's the only way to do it. And a shameless plug for the event that my Fire Scope group, Cal Chiefs, and Mike at Esri, we put on. I think it's going to be early February. Is a public safety basically summit work group, and we did have last year. We had 3 individuals come in from 3 very different departments to talk about how they did their technology adoption. It all started with a plan because let me guess, I'm sure maybe I'm just unique, but usually it's they take the one guy that maybe wears glasses or he's got a little bit of tech background and they throw it all on that individual. Say, hey, make all this happen. Our RMS, our new CAD, our common operator, make it all happen rather than have not only a plan, but buy-in from the members. And I think when it comes to new technology, I think some of us, different generations, are a little bit jaded because a few years ago, you did get some new technology that was lousy, and everybody remembers the lousy one. They don't remember the one that helped change their life. And I'm impressed by some of those new electric engines because I know when we saw it out at the Esri event, they built it from the ground up to be what it was rather. So it has some pretty cool things on, but it's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be for everyone at all. But to me, I think the human element of the adoption, which means starting early, getting an article I just wrote for fire engineering was getting your IT folks involved, because all of a sudden it's no different than when they went from horses to an engine. They all of a sudden had stable hands to mechanics, which might not have been the quickest shift. And it's no different if you're throwing all of a sudden you have some things that might be some network changes and all that. And now you're just throwing in your IT folks. But I can't say enough for making it a little bit more of a group effort. And I even mean bringing in labor, saying, hey, where do we want to go? How do we want to get there? And then when the vendors come out with the shiny objects, you're looking at it from a way different lens. And like, my son whacked his head. We had one of those Teslas with the doors that go up this way, right? That when you first get the car, that's all you're doing is showing off the gull wing doors. We're on our way to the SAT, and my son whacked his head on that door. And as he was about to pass out, he said, improvements are supposed to make life easier. And at the moment, it wasn't easy for him. And I always think about that. I know he wasn't the first one to coin it, but whenever we look at technology, it has to come down to, will it also make our life easier in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, no, well said, Phil. And Scott, you see, we got a couple questions here. And this first one is kind of what we're talking about is talking about having that plan and sharing those expectations. So meaning, what expectations can or should departments have to their vendors, as well as vendors can or should have the department? So Mike, what are some expectations you would like if you've got your product, right? What do you want to hear from the department? What should they be telling you so you can help meet that plan?
Well, I think agencies should take every possible opportunity to help drive that market. And so if you're talking to vendors that aren't listening, right, that aren't taking your input and how they modify, deploy, design their applications, then you might be talking to the wrong vendor. And and I mentioned that at the opening, we've got a history of modifying our day-to-day practices because of certain technologies we buy, when we should make every effort to modify the technology to meet our day-to-day practices. And that's, I think, still, somewhat of an opportunity, I'll say, for vendors. I mean, a lot of times there's a solution showing up looking for a problem. Let's make sure we're addressing the problem first and then deploying the solution, the appropriate solution, actually designed to support that agency's operations.
Yeah, and the department should realize too, sometimes that plan may They come last minute. And so what are we in 2025? So what was it? 2024 or 2023? I think it was 2024. We get an alert in Columbia, South Carolina. There's massive hurricanes coming, and we need a plan now. And I believe I picked up the phone and was calling and texting Mike and saying, "Hey, help! Here's our expectation. This hurricane's coming. It's supposed to turn. We have no idea, and there's a major concern. And I'm telling you all, with dealing with Esri and needing that plan last minute, I think we had a plan in place within 30 minutes. He connected me with their emergency, and I'm going to butcher it, Mike.
No,
He
you're
connected me
good.
with the emergency response division or team, and we sat on the phone for probably 2 hours. And the next morning at our Chiefs meeting, I walked in with the plan that Esri had helped us out with. We had everything from water gauges on the map to evacuation routes. So sometimes those plans come in last minute, but you got to communicate that very directly, very bluntly to the vendor so they know how to help you. What do you think about that, Phil, in the hazmat world?
Well, you mentioned that, and Esri is a great one, really, to plug, because so many agencies have the Esri platform, but many don't even realize what they have, and the tools that are at their disposal, which I think is awesome. And going back on the same, any of you in the room that have been responsible for your communication center, I spent almost 5 years of my career responsible for a 14-city communication center. And nothing will get your brain more down the road of let's try to do everything the same than running a comm center. Because when you find out the vulnerabilities you have and that your neighbors really can't help you because they're using something different, that's the time where you reach out to the counties, the townships, the reservations, whatever it is, and your neighbors, and see what they're doing. Go after even a group purchase, but in a sense, it does give an advantage to the vendors that are doing a real good job, as it should. And there's just that advantage sometimes of going down the road and not trying to reinvent the wheel, but being on something similar. As far as technology for what people need, yeah, when it came to the hazmat world, like for me, I developed a training system for gas detection. But if your department doesn't have a gas detector, I always say, buy that first. Do you have a tick? No, buy that first. Like, your training should be really important, but there's just things. And early on, we talked about not everybody has the same needs. And what I don't want to see is departments chase certain things they may not need because it looks like what everybody's doing when they don't have the basics. And we're told a lot in our EIT group, hey, can you develop standards? Well, that's really difficult in this world now. I think the standard should be you talk to your neighbors. That's what we call interoperability, right? That conversation, see what they're using, see what the benefit is. And then the standard is staying ahead of it so that you can have your vendors work for you rather than show up and say, this is what we have to offer you that'll change the world for you. Because as we know, we've all been kind of numb to that. So reaching out to your neighbors, making the standard be that, is this going to make our lives better? What are we trying to solve? And then don't forget, just like your analogy with hay and horses, is there's tools at our disposal where it's not going to necessarily get rid of jobs, but it should change them. You should, as a fire chief, you should be looking downrange and saying, we're dealing with a lot more numbers and words now. I should be thinking about an analyst. And the difference between those two positions is quite a bit. It's a whole different path in college. Doesn't mean that your current employees can't come up to speed, but I think there's certain things we also hang on to because we think that that's what we need to hang on to. And sometimes it takes that plan. And in the planning phase is where you say, do we really need that anymore? And just like in operations, there might be a division that you need more help in, and there might be a division that you break down and turn it over, back to the neighborhood, so to speak, because it's not a concern anymore. And that needs to be considered in technology adoption.
Yeah. And always. So Scott, our cities are two different worlds, right? So we got Charlottesville, 10 square miles, Garland, Texas. How large?
54, 58 square miles.
There you go. So almost, 5 times as large. And so this question is talking about how practical are EV fire trucks? Sounds good in theory, but are the restraints too much to make them scalable? And thinking about that, it's really technology across the board, right, Scott? It's what works in Garland may or may not work in Charlottesville. What do you think about that, Scott?
I think it's back to like Mike was saying, building that strategic plan for your city and looking at your risks, identifying what actually kind of revenue you have available to you, what's going to be available in the next few years, meeting with your IT people, meeting with your police department, because they control a lot of the technology we use too, especially on the CAD side. A lot of our police departments, control that CAD. And that's one big one to look at, because if they're looking at changing that CAD system, I would hold off on adopting any technology until they get a new CAD system in place, because almost everything we do, integrates with our CAD. So you're gonna spend a lot of money integrating it now, and then a lot of money integrating it later. So you really have to look at that and depend and look and see what fits your city. But yeah, the EV fire truck. Do we want to jump down this rabbit hole?
Man, I'm knee deep in it, Scott. And you're talking about the different departments. We have one in our city called a sustainability department. And I think the key is to work with all these departments within your city or your county or your government agency or whatever, because they have access to resources that we just don't know about as firefighters. And these folks are bending over backwards to help us and locate grants and bring it in the building department to put the plugs in. And if we do it, it will be very strategic, very focused, and making sure we have a plan, like Mike said. So for us, it may work. I'll tell you what's not working. Talking about the next question of solutions that are not working. What's not working is our fire trucks continuing to have emissions issues and being out of service for multiple days in a row, and that's not working. So we've got to find a solution. And is this one? I don't know.
In talking with a couple of the manufacturers too, they said the problem with our diesel engines is the EPA keeps putting more and more emissions controls on them. So it's more expensive, it's more time consuming, and to build these engines, and they're more intricate. So you're going to have more break fixes. It's more costly to do it, and that's one of the reasons to potentially look at EV trucks. More so than just environmentally friendly trucks, the cost savings of fuel over the years and oil changes and what is, the annual maintenance of it, what does that cost you? And you have to look at that and take a systems approach of what your city's doing, what your city's capable of, what does the infrastructure look like. The only too with EV trucks, and a buddy of mine, we wrote an article about building a fire station for the next 50 years. I think we do a really good job of building it for today's problems. That we're putting saunas in there for cancer prevention. We're putting clean rooms. We're putting bunker gear on the other side of the stations. Sometimes put in vacuum rooms. We're doing a great job. But are you looking 10, 20, 30 years down the road? And one of the things we talked about was hybrid or EV vehicles. If you're building a station today, I would build the infrastructure for that electrical charging system in now, because that can be expensive to retrofit years later.
Yeah, and you look at who we have on here, and I think it's a great day to have some of these conversations, because the first step when you talk about building new fire stations, where are you going to put them at? And gone are the days of firefighters and fire chiefs like, here. No, you need to call Esri. You need to call a mapping company. You need to run your data. You need to run your analytics and find out where you need a fire station. Not today, but tomorrow. Because once you plop that $8 to $10 million, that's on the cheap side investment down, buddy. It's there.
And Esri has it. I've used it. I've used it in my own city. They have a very easy program to plot your 5 minute response times, 10 minutes. You can pick what you want, distance or time, and it'll show you the blob that it makes. So if you want to try to put in fire stations in different areas to do your coverage, or see what coverage you have now in 5 minute response times, 4 minute response, it's very easy to do on Esri. All your GIS analysts could do it real easy. It's a click of a button now. Used to be, from my understanding, used to be a little bit more complicated to run that out. Isn't that right, Mike?
Yeah. Now it's 3 clicks in a web browser, and you're doing drive time analysis from your fire station or any location. And then I'll do a shameless plug for FRI next week. We have in the Chiefs track a resource allocation presentation. I think it's about 90 minutes. So I'll be there as Dr. Lori Moore Merrill, and Alex Timms, who was just with Roswell, Georgia Fire Department, is going to do a presentation on how to place either apparatus or fire stations, but very specific to fire apparatus travel times and deployment. So taking into, what does a traffic circle look like to a tiller versus a straight stick, or, what does a speed bump really do to a Class A engine in a travel time scenario? So it should be a pretty good presentation. So again, if shameless plug for IFC's FRI next week, come by and see us for that resource allocation class, because Scott, that's exactly what it's about, those kind of workflows.
And I'll give Esri and Mike a plug too. If you see his booth, go by and talk to him. He's not trying to sell you anything. You already have it. He's just trying to help you use what you already have. In fact, I was asked the other day, a buddy of mine's writing an article, and he was like, hey, what are the 5 technologies fire chiefs probably aren't using? And one of the five I said is Esri. It's like they probably know they have it, but they have no idea what's available to them and how powerful it is that they could use every day through the dashboards, through the response times, just the visualization of mapping that you can do in instant command. So I think that's one of the technologies fire chiefs have at their fingertips and just don't realize it.
And I hate to, I kind of go back to that planning, and having been someone that went from straight line, borders, districts, line in the sand, to closest unit using drive time analysis, not necessarily using traffic. And that is something you really need to bring in the people early, both labor and different areas, because to get everybody on board to the advantages, because we all know that when we're ordering an Uber, we're going to order the one that's going to be there in 3 or 5 minutes, not 20 minutes. And we look at the map and we go, they say they're in 5 minutes, but I know that. But when it comes to those changes, if your department has not done them yet, they are fairly severe. In a discussion with the right people, it makes complete sense. But as soon as you're sending an engine, quarter mile further because it actually is closer, but instead of a fire, it's a frequent flyer, man, you will hear from it. And I think that it ends up putting a bad name on technology. And what I'm talking about is what makes absolute sense and even plays out in the data. Sometimes it's harder for people to adjust when they knew that, hey, when I hit Main Street, the other side of that street was engine 2. That's not our neck of the woods. So bring in your biggest potential haters early and show them the advantages, show them how smarter this is. And I love that it was brought up that we need to design things for 50 years from now, because if we're just designing for today, we're already behind.
Well, the fact is now too, when you're building a fire station or ordering a fire truck, you're going from 18 to 24 months delivery to 48 months delivery.
Oh God.
It's really, I mean, one of the workflows we often use is that maintenance versus acquisition kind of algorithm to determine when to put something in reserve or to buy a new fire truck, right? And that's kind of here recently. I mean, I think it's getting better. I'm not buying fire trucks nowadays, but there's just the supply chain issues have completely disrupted that whole model. So interesting.
Yeah. I really want to find somebody to talk about the refurbing them, man, because that's where I'm at. Between all the new standards and what you got to do, I'm like, hey man, can I just send this truck off to somebody and in 3 months just send it back in somewhat newer form? It's a rough thing. But Phil, what you were talking about, bringing those people down to the stations, that was one of the things that our former deputy city manager, special shout out to Eden, he's now city manager up in the Philadelphia area. But that was one of his things, was bringing city management down to the stations and spending time at the firehouses and letting them ride those fire trucks so they can see what it feels like to go from point A to point B. And so it's one thing, you got to cover all bases, right? We show you on a map, we show you with a clock, hey, it's going to take this long to get here, but put them in that apparatus and let them feel that. And then say, hey, look, now imagine it's an emergency. How much longer does it feel? That's one thing we're trying to do here, is get other department heads down to the stations, meet the folks, ride the trucks, and kind of understand what we're doing. And our plan or our mission is not just for the fire department, but it's for the city as a whole. So
I love that. Even the size of the apparatus.
Yeah, even the size of it. That was a
Yeah.
talk today with the EV. They were like, that's a lot smaller. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Well, yeah. And I was just out in Italy and went to my cousin's place, and the street we were on could barely fit the teeny car we were in. I thought, well, they've adapted, yet we keep buying big giant fire engines and the roads keep getting narrower.
Yeah. And we could have another whole discussion, probably 2-hour discussion, on the unsustainable path the fire service seems to be heading down with apparatus costs, station costs, employee costs. Yeah. Hey, we've got a few questions. I'll try to get through a couple of these real quick. Do you have any examples of when a fire department jumped to buy a solution and then realized it wasn't actually solving the problem they intended to solve? I think it's probably every fire department's done that. We've just brought the shiny new toy or bought a product that didn't work with your CAD system. I know one of my buddies, fire chief in Kansas, he was talking about pre-incident planning software. He bought it, and the salesman, sold him the world on it. Then they found out that it didn't work with their CAD system, and the API that had to be written was more expensive than the pre-incident planning program system. So that goes into that being strategic, involving your IT departments. If you have unused icons on your desktop, you're probably paying licensing fees for it, and it was that shiny new toy that you bought that you didn't actually end up using. So, yeah, I think that like every department's fallen victim of that. Be strategic. don't be in a rush to buy technology. It'd be more expensive to buy something quickly than it will be to take your time.
And
Uh,
Scott, I think easy one on that is if you are building something that the vendor has to build because they've never done it, that's when you ought to step back.
Yeah.
You know, just step back, circle, go talk to a few people, maybe take a vacation, read a book, do something, because you're. It's surprising to me that we still go down that path. Now, if it's something if you find out that nobody's done it and you need it, sure. But when you go down the path of APIs, that's the other one is if it's for operations, you better have somebody from operations on that team, because the last thing I'm probably going to need is to have somebody from operations spec out, the new office printer. But when it comes to something that goes on the rig, I've seen it where now you peek in the conference room and there isn't one person representing current operations. And that's also oftentimes a kiss of death for using, because sometimes it's a great technology, but people will find every reason. It's similar to dishes in the sink when you have kids. They will find every reason to not adopt that, even though it could be good adoption. I go back to that human element. There's lots of technologies that actually would have worked pretty well, but were disregarded because the early steps weren't taken to include people.
If you don't include the people that have to actually use and implement the technology in the purchase or procurement process, you're setting yourself up for failure. You can't just walk into a fire station and say, hey, use this. They've got to be involved with identifying the appropriate solution, right? And then they're the ones that have to implement it. So why would you not have their buy-in or give them ownership of the entire process?
You two are dropping gems right now. You future
Yeah,
chiefs
well,
out there, listen to that,
yeah,
man. That is
what
magic.
you're talking about is called
How about
common
current
sense.
chiefs? Current chiefs should listen
Current
too.
chiefs, all you current chiefs out there, listen.
You guys
to
are talking, it's called common sense, and we don't use that in fire service. So,
Man, I tell you what, man, and I've learned from great mentors along the way. Nobody is realizes this stuff overnight, right? You hear from mentors and others' mistakes, and that's one thing we're trying to do here is involve all the folks. If we're changing the uniforms or the apparatus, I'm not the one using some of that stuff, man. Y'all come to the table, tell me what you want. My job's to go find the money, and that's kind of been our method here. So we brought the ladder trucks in a day, the EV, and hey, Chief, what do you think? Hey man, I don't think. I've got a couple, things that I needed to do. I needed to not break. And when it does break, because it's mechanical, I needed to be able to be repaired really quick. If it meets those two things for me, I'm not worried about the design of it or what. That's y'all's world. Your users, figure it out, bring me a plan, tell me how much it costs, and I'll go beg the city manager. It is really that easy at the deputy chief level if you want to be successful, in my opinion. They ain't ran me out of town yet, but a couple more months to go.
yeah, just give it a little bit more time.
A little bit more time. The honeymoon's almost over. Trust me.
Yeah. Hey,
What's
I
the
think
next
we could
question?
wrap these next two up into one kind of question discussion point. But thinking of those 75% of the departments in North America with 5 stations or less, could the panel give input on what is the one new technology item that chiefs should and those departments should look at today? And the next one kind of rolls in that. Can departments find out what technology is available for the fire service and what's the best way to do that? So, what technology should departments with 5 stations or less implement, and where can they find out about that technology?
Naris?
I would say though that ties back into the conversation we just had. I mean, help prioritize based on your, organizational objectives. What are your problems? What's keeping you up at night? And then have your personnel help you determine what that best technology is. I mean, I could throw out and say, hey, geospatial, right? But we don't, understand what the problem is. What is the problem you're trying to solve, and then find the appropriate solution. In addition to that, I would strongly consider not so much technology, but the people. And do you have a technologist? Do you have an analyst under the fire chief? That makes a huge difference, because if you're dealing with nothing wrong with it, if you're dealing with, let's say, a countywide or citywide IT, first of all, you better have a good relationship with them. I'll quote Chief Powers from the SCI: take some coffee and donuts and go sit down with your IT director, because their priorities operating outside the fire service are not the same as you as a firefighter or a fire chief. They're dealing with everything from school buses and dump trucks or trash trucks, and including your fire trucks and ambulances. So they need to understand what your priorities are. Beyond that, though, start making a plan to add personnel, the right personnel to your team that can help you address these technology problems.
Yeah, and Mike, you talking about Chief Powers, Joe Powers. He was deputy chief here at Charlottesville, one or two before me. And when I go to meetings, they still expect coffee and donuts. I'm like, hey, man, I'm not Jeff. I didn't bring coffee. I didn't bring coffee and donuts, bro. I brought this smile and these laughs. This is what I'm offering.
Yeah.
But that shows you how impactful it was and has been. And he set that tone for our organization, and it's really still paying dividends today. And on a serious note.
Yeah, I think you're right too, Mike. For one, a needs assessment. You got to do a needs assessment in your own department before you do anything, because you may not, going back to that previous question, if you bought something that you didn't need, well, you didn't do a needs assessment. You just bought the shiny thing on the counter and thought that was cool. So do a real needs assessment in your department. What are your gaps that you're trying to fix? And then also see if you can quantify that too. So if you get that technology, you can quantify it. But what you said about people is so spot on too, because how many times do you have that one proponent in your department that is pushing to get that one piece of technology, and then you get it, and then he leaves for another fire department, or promotes. And then now who's going to fill that vacuum? And a lot of times what happens is somebody promotes in that position does not care anything about technology, and I know lots of departments that have some great technology, but they aren't utilizing it to its capacity because that happened, and the person in that position doesn't care. And so they're not utilizing, and it's a shame because they're spending a lot of money and they're not being as efficient or effective as they could be with that technology.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think the conferences are a great place, but bring, whether it be somebody from labor or somebody that you think will be an advocate for this, and not necessarily just your nerds, right? Not somebody who completely already understands it. Because like you just said, if it gets labeled on that one person, then everybody's thinking, oh no, I'm not as smart as them. I'm never going to figure this out, when you realize it's actually not that difficult. So the needs assessment is, yeah, do we need it? But will we use it? I think the conferences get all the vendors in the same place, and it's hard to answer what one thing any department would need over another department. It's so different. But you mentioned earlier the police departments. I hate to say it, fire brothers and sisters, but PD is way ahead of us in technology, just light years. I mean, some of the things that we're discussing, whether it be the public safety cloud or, oh no, a drone in the sky. I mean, they've just been doing that leaps and bounds ahead of us. They've all been wearing body worn cameras that now do AI and all that. So I would say go to the conferences, but just don't forget to bring not just the decision makers and the finance side of it, because I know even with my own IT, who are incredibly sharp, it took a visit from, say, Apple came down to my department to discuss the security in an iPad, because most people, maybe their kids just had them, they watched movies on them, and they didn't realize the things that haunt them at night, which is cybersecurity. Bring in those key representatives from those companies, whether it be Apple, Microsoft, Esri, to allay those fears and talk about it ahead of time. Because if you show up and you say, here's our new dog, please feed it and care for it. Yeah, it might bite you. That's not a great way to introduce a puppy to the family, right? You don't need to do that with technology either to your city staff.
And it's
Hey,
going to
Will,
bite
is there any
Yeah,
conference in
yeah.
particular? Will, is there any conference in particular you can think of that people should come to find about technology?
Let me think. I know of one, TSI, and I'm gonna be blunt. Last year was my first one, and I have to say I learned more, not just by taking classes, but just by talking to like-minded people, right? Just by, hey, what's working at your department, and the vendors. I had one thought process of something when we did that workshop about, how do we implement it? Do we use NFPA to, set standards? And Kevin introduced me to this vendor, and we had a very blunt conversation in the hallway about how that was a terrible idea. And he gave me his side of it. And dude, about an hour into that conversation, we're best friends. I'm understanding how he's approaching things from a vendor side, and how sometimes if we were to put all these standards down on them, it actually slows down progress. Their job is to help us. So by helping ourselves, we're hurting ourselves at the same time. TSI is phenomenal. Getting there, meeting your peers, talking to the vendors, it's invaluable. So we're going to make a strategic investment this year and send multiple people. We've got another conference coming up. We emailed the IT director and said, hey, the liaison that comes and helps us at the fire department, let's go half on it, right? So we'll cover travel and we'll cover his ticket. Can you cover the food and other little things to get him to the conference. And he's like, oh yeah, why not? So now he's coming with us. So we're sending 9 people to one conference in regards to technology. So you have to have that investment and you have to bring the right people. So more than anything else.
And I can't tell you the names, but we are in talks, and I think we've got a firm maybe from some big companies this year. So we're looking forward to announcing that here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Can I say one other thing, Scott? And I don't want to, shoot ourselves in the foot, but I see some vendors starting to do this, and it is a phenomenal idea. So we love the parties, we love the hoot nannies, we love all that stuff. We like to get together and share ideas, but I've seen some vendors that are starting to do these scholarships, and that again is invaluable to some of these departments that don't have the funding, that can't send that person there. So that person's sitting there wishing they could go to these conferences, man. So some of the vendors, step up and say, hey, look, here's $1,000 scholarship out there, bring back something or write something, whatever you got to do to earn that. That's probably been the most impressive thing I've seen over the last few years to get folks to these educational seminars and conferences that I think.
Shout out Jill from iRoll.
Shout out Jill. Yeah. Yeah. Rockstar Jill Cotton with iRoll. Thank you for that scholarship. We end up not needing it, so we're donating it to someone else. So there we go. Here's another question. Was this one? You want that one, Scott, again? I can't read it.
Well, I think this is just somebody just kind of helping the audience too, is asking the right questions to the vendors when you're looking at purchasing technology or adopting it. Who are the people involved? How does this technology directly support our goals? What kind of training is involved? What kind of support is involved? There are some tech companies that once you buy it, that you're on your own, and there's some other ones that have great support systems in place to help you for the month, days, weeks, months, and years afterwards. How are they involved with development, if at all? How do I access the data? Who owns our data? I would say another one too is, do they have a digital sandbox? Like, are they able to test their updates before they put them out live to your crews out in the streets? Because we've run into that problem, and if you're out working on EPCR and they do an update and it messes up your patient report, and you got to grab a piece of paper quick or something. So great questions.
Yeah, I like that last one, that who owns our data. That is more important than some folks realize. I hit that wall a few times going to change vendors, and you get a backpack file, still don't even know what that is. And another vendor's like, hey man, that thing's encrypted. It doesn't even transfer over. And that's when you hit the uh-oh button and you realize maybe you should have asked those questions up front before you assign that contract. So always find that out. Who owns our data?
Well, the key here is to have these kind of questions in this kind of language in your RFI and RFPs.
Yeah.
But make it clear that, hey, I own the data. I want to be able to share that data across different either networks or applications, but have that in the RFP and then eventually in your contract language. And so if you engage like with the Fire Data Analyst Working Group, Fire Dogs, or the IFC Tech Council, there's a lot of resources that are provided through those groups too. You can learn a lot of this stuff. But certainly if anybody has any specific questions about RFP language or contract language, they can reach out to me. I'd be glad to provide some examples of that.
Yeah, and that's your IFC Technology Council, and I think you can probably find emails through the IFC website, but reach out to us. We can put you up with other members of the council that have purchased technology and kind of learn from them. So, and that's what we're here for. We're your council to help with technology and drive technology in the fire service. I want to switch gears just a bit. Phil, you created HazSim, and I'm just kind of curious how you came about that. What was the emphasis, or what created the HazSim, and kind of tell us a little bit about HazSim since we're talking about technology.
I appreciate that. I was actually at a Fed-funded class years and years ago, and we got to work with some real product. So it was a week away from home. It's just a handful of us traveling across the country to walk around with a detection meter and get a couple beeps off real product. And I thought, why did we have, I basically live in Hollywood. Why would I have to come all the way out here to experience this sort of training? And just had the idea for a meter that is controlled by the instructor that gives those realistic experiences. And then fast forward to today, it's fun. I've got many industries, many countries. In fact, our newest system went to Australia, and we're going to be going out there towards the end of the year for a mining industry, or really it just for gas detection. And now, as you know, with the changes with NFPA 1001 and the horrible instances we've had with firefighters with the gas or propane explosions. It's just the realistic using of a meter rather than just walking around and pretending. So for me, what it taught me with technology, though, was product just has to be easy to use. Product has to be understood by the end user. It has to be able to pass on through generations. So our early adopters, one of them was Mike's department, Henrico, and when that person retires, can somebody else pick up the system and still train? But for me, it did actually also show me, because we've progressed to where now our system can be in the cloud. You could access your training data. You can change things on the fly with your meter. And just being a firefighter, I know two things. One, if your product is good, that people will say good things about it. But if it's lousy, people will say other things. So knowing that, we've always been top notch in customer service, and it's given me that kind of extra level, even dealing with vendors. I think going back to those questions to ask the vendors, a lot of times, like the question on data, yes, put it in your RFQ, RFPs. But if you're at a booth and you ask them that question and they look at you like you have three heads, you already have your answer. It means it's something, they're thinking about selling back to you. They also, and speaking of vendors, the vendors that are listening to this, understand your customer, because we're all different. There's a subject earlier or a question earlier about how most departments are 5 stations or less. Well, there's some great products out there, from robots to drones and this and that, but none of us have the personnel to actually staff those things. I mean, I've been a big fan of using law enforcement for the drones because it seems like every cop in our city has one. All those things to consider, and then don't be shy to reach out not only to IFC, but your neighbors and anybody else that's adopted things, because our group EIT was tasked a few years ago with almost creating like a Yelp for technology. And we realized it is too big of an undertaking. And what it requires is people to pick up the phone, mash the keys, and talk to any of the people in this room about the technology they're considering. And just like I mentioned earlier, it has to make your life easier. It has to fit your mission, has to, obviously fit the budget.
And there's no repository or like database of all the technology companies out there, and there's new ones coming online every day. I mean, I find out about new ones, almost every week. And I was texting Kevin yesterday about one. I was like, "Hey, we should look into this one," And so it's hard to nail down, like, how do you find out about all of them? Even on the Tech Council, we've had to break up into subcommittees. We have a GIS subcommittee, we have an AI subcommittee, we have a wearables, because it just got to be so much. You can't keep track of all of it anymore. And now, like with AI and how fast AI is developing, Chad Kraus leads that. Chief Kraus leads that. He's been on it, and man, there's some amazing things happening with AI in the future, which actually leads me to Mike. After at FDIC, Chad Kraus and I were up on stage, and we were telling the firefighters that robots and AI is not going to take over their job. And Mike came up to me afterwards and said, "Do you seriously believe that?" And and the question came on last show, will they take over our jobs? So I wrote an article about it in Fire Rescue for Fire Rescue One, and I gave a firm maybe.
But we've seen internationally some agencies doing that. Literally pulling a firefighter off of what ends up being like a Type 3 engine in a very urbanized Asian country, and putting a robot that can ride up an elevator, 30 liters of water, vent fan, run it with an Xbox controller kind of thing. But the point, I think, overall for our listeners here or attendees is that you have to consider how we're going to integrate robotics. I know we're all doing it at UAS, but I'm even beyond that. UGVs and actually humanoid type robotics into your day-to-day operations, because much like 2 in, 2 out, if we don't do it, somebody's going to do it for us. If there's some kind of agency that can say, okay, I'm not putting humans in IDLH anymore, we should figure out the best way to do that, not an occupational safety and health type agency telling us how to do it. So
like OSHA.
Yeah. But I mean, if we don't do it, somebody's going to do it for us. So the fire service as a whole needs to address how we're going to adopt robotics for day-to-day operations. It's coming either way.
And I think I absolutely agree, Chief. And I think that the human element, I mean, I have 20 and 21-year-old. They think completely different than I do, and anyone in this room. And I notice with our newer firefighters, technology is not it's not a big deal. I mean, for one, they're used to the pinch zoom and all that, but a lot of the same, like 10 years ago when we were dealing with, I'll just say that generation, we're beyond that. In fact, we now have, I think, thinkers that are way more critical of the technology and the expectations already out the gate. And then not just say introducing, say, a robot to take the place of a human, but really how, especially when it comes to, say, training devices or using them on the scene, because there's a lot of great stuff coming out with heads up display, firefighter tracking. As an ops chief, I look at that, and if a sales rep showed me a screen with 50 dots on it or 125, like a fire I had last year, 125 firefighters on scene, I don't want to see that. That's like seeing a red traffic strip and you're late for something. Show me the important stuff. And I think that is all that the human element, not just in the adoption of, say, buying the technology, but using the technology and then utilizing it how it should be used, and making it work for you. I like to say that AI, I have a name for it, but it's not appropriate for a webinar, but does my laundry and my dishes, right? When I see somebody still taking notes in a meeting, I just scratch my head and say, wow, okay. Or Scott, you talked about Notebook LM at FDIC. I had 12 individuals take the engineer's exam on my shift. All 12 were introduced to Notebook LM for the written. All 12 passed the written. I couldn't help them with the manipulative, but things like that just, they do your dishes, do your laundry. It didn't give them an advantage of, say, cheating. It helped through the process. And I think that's where AI at the admin level, the station level, before we really think about replacing somebody with a robot, because that one's still tough to picture, but I can. But I think it's all those mundane tasks, lots of things we do, some of which aren't even necessary, which is why we go back to a plan to say, do we really need to do that? And what is the data we can collect that's going to help us in the future?
Just like when you transition from horses, Chief. Remember that?
Yeah, no, apparently. Yeah. Well, that was a good thing in LA, because all the hay storage turned into handball courts. So there's always an advantage.
Yeah, you guys
that must be where all the smog came from in LA.
Yeah, there you go. See?
It's been bad just lately.
Looking up some of this stuff. I'd never heard of Notebook LM, and I'm like, man, I got to do better. I had to look this stuff up. Yeah, I see that. Now, also, I took a little bit of a note. You mentioned something about how you started, HazSim, sending the firefighters across country. And as a budget chief, I'm always looking for, better ways to maximize our dollars. And if we can do the training right here in-house and save some money, man, why would we not? And to put that money to better use. And
there's so many, so many agencies that will come out to you. And to me, I was focused on the experience. What is that moment? What is that critical moment when you're 3 a.m. and you're about to ventilate a roof and you're firing up the saw at the bottom of the ladder? What is that part of the training that was most important to make you good at your job and go home safely at the end of the shift? And I think even in the technology side of things, how does this make our lives better? And of course, the electric fire engine is up there with the Euro helmet, but I'll admit I've worn one of those, not on a call, but I've worn it, and they are comfortable. You got to put the shield down to protect yourself from the tomatoes being thrown at you, because it's different. And those of us, I think everybody in this room has traveled Europe and seen how they do operations, and sometimes it might be different, but it doesn't mean it's bad.
It goes back to that original conversation of sometimes things are going to work in your area and it may not work in other areas. And when we looked at that EV fire truck today, the first question out of their mouths, "Oh, we're going to Euro helmets next, Chief?" And I said, "Well, no, that's not happening. And if the fire chief made me, that'd be the only way we do it. And when he made me, or if he made me, it'd probably be on back order. Would be my story." Now he's probably watching this, so I can't use that excuse if that was something. But I don't see him forcing that. He's pretty traditional on some aspects, and fire helmets may be just one of those. But again, they may work great for some departments in America, right? But not ours. We'll stay away from the Euro helmets. We'll stay with what we got.
You do realize they've been doing this a lot longer than we have. Maybe they learned something along the way.
I'm a good
It's such a great analogy, if you will.
Yeah.
It kind of sums up what we're up against often in technology adoption.
Me sitting here pushing for change in technology, and then we get on topic of helmets. I'm like, nope. Hard no. I draw the line. Give me leather, give me nothing. Do you want to wrap us up, Scott? We got 5 minutes left.
Yeah,
man.
we got 5 minutes left. Before we go, I want to make sure we thank the IFC and Fire Rescue One for partnering with us to do this. Next week is FRI. Unfortunately, I won't be there this year. I'll be in Mexico, but I'll be thinking about y'all when I'm drinking a margarita on the beach.
I don't believe you, but
well, good for you. You saw my poker face. But no, if you're at FDIC, I mean FRI, Phil, do you have a booth there this year?
1552. I think it's right within the tech zone. I will not be there, but I will not be with you in Mexico on the beach. I will be at work.
You're welcome. We'll be doing some scuba diving there. And then, of course, Mike will be there. He's delivering presentations, and you're going to have a booth there, and your whole team will be there, won't you?
Correct. Yeah, and we're also in that same tech zone near Phil's location. So come see us.
And then after that, they'll be at TSI. So come to TSI and meet us at TSI. But so, hey, just wrapping up, Mike, do you have any, passing comments, thoughts that you want to share before we leave?
Yeah, certainly come see us at FRI, but try to get to TSI. And much like Phil and his group does at their Cal Chiefs event and the EIT event in February, bring an operations person and bring a technology person, bring a pair. So you can both address with a lot of these questions, we discussed today. Certainly do that. And then, find out what you already have access to. And that's also something we can assist with. So if you want to reach out and find out, if you do have technologies you're not leveraging, please give us a call. And then the whole coffee and donuts, like Chief Brocious was describing, go find your IT director, hang out for a day. That's all. But thanks for having me today, guys. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Phil, what about you? You got any passing comments, thoughts?
Just there's a great group in this room, and I think anyone that goes to these conferences, they'll meet somebody like Mike, and you'll have his phone number in your phone, and he's 100% available to you as everybody in this room. So technology adoption does not have to be daunting whatsoever. You have resources out there amongst all these groups and all these people. And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. So next week, Kevin is hosting the Hootenanny, which is a happy hour at FRI. What day and time, and how do people find out about that?
Wednesday night, if you're going to FRI, hit me up. Email or LinkedIn is best. And then there also is going to be a podcast booth. Will, we need to talk about this a bit more, but we do have a podcast booth space and may even do some live streaming of sorts. So we have to find a couple people and nail down that schedule. But look for the podcast booth outside of the show floor, and you'll see us doing this real time. And you can even get Will's autograph.
Yeah, I'm only participating if I get a DJ booth. I've got needs. So I need the headphones, DJ booth. If not, I'm out.
We got you.
His ego has swelled since we've been starting the show.
No, man, it was the EMT yesterday. Once I got that after my name.
Hey, and also Wednesday happens to be Chief Cox's birthday. So if you're at the Hootenanny, buy him a shot.
Because that's what Mike needs, the shots. No. Shout out, Scott. Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, hey, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we'll be back on in 2 weeks. So
thanks everybody. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank y'all.